Chapter 12, Vanduke. The night had settled thick and quiet, just hours before Johnny's departure. The city slept, uneasily, with its walls lit faintly and sentries doing their final rounds. But behind the mill, under the steel bones of an old Brotherhood garage, something stirred. "Johnny, before you go," Elias said, his voice lower than usual, like he didn't want even the walls to hear him. "We've got something for you." Johnny narrowed his eyes. "If it's a send-off speech, save it. I'm not dead yet." Elias gave a small, tired grin. "You might want to hear this one." He motioned him to follow, and together they crossed the yard, past refitted tanks and broken-down recon drones, toward a heavy steel-rolled door half swallowed in ivy and oxidized metal. "We were going to run field tests for another few months," Elias said, his voice now tinged with the weight of both pride and caution. "But I suppose DC will be the best test bed of them all." They stopped before the garage door. Johnny folded his arms. "I get it. You all know I don't like power armor." He exhaled, motioning with one hand. "It's too bulky. Too slow. The frame itself takes more upkeep than half the machines in the foundry. And don't get me started on the flexibility. I've fought faster without it." Elias didn't argue. Instead, he stepped to the control panel and keyed in a code. With a deep mechanical whir and the rattle of rusted bolts unlocking, the old garage door began to lift. Smoke hissed out, and lights flickered on inside. What stood in the center was unmistakably power armor, but nothing like he'd seen before. Elias stepped in front of the machine as it stood upright on its perch, a black-on-steel bodysuit, sleeker than T-45 or 51, almost skin-tight over a heavy-duty retrofitted vault suit. There was no external frame. No towering bulk. The plating hugged tight to key impact zones: chest, shoulders, thighs, forearms. Beneath that, a layered mesh of vault weave and internal cabling. It looked more like a weapon than a suit. Like someone had melted the bones of a tank into the body of a ghost. Elias turned back to Johnny, proud. "That's why we designed this." He motioned to the armor, sleek, deadly, humming faintly with life. "We call it the LC-01. Not quite a power armor frame. Not a combat exosuite either. It's something between." He circled the suit, running a hand across the shoulder plate where the faint outline of a 717 had been etched, burned into the armor with a plasma torch. "We retrofitted an old Vault-Tec prototype with our own tech. Sensors, scanners, absorbers inside and out. The outer layers pull radiation straight from the wasteland. The inner harness, it feeds off you. No fusion core. No fuel lines. You're the battery." Johnny stepped forward, cautious, studying the armor like it might bite. "That's a big gamble." Elias didn't blink. "So is walking into DC alone." Johnny touched the shoulder plate, fingers resting against the cold metal. The moment he did, it shimmered. Not bright. Not glowing. Just a subtle hum, like the wasteland recognized him. A few readout pips blinked green on the forearm console. The armor knew who he was. Elias continued, quieter now. The FEV in you. The radiation in your blood. It's not just a mutation, it's potential. This suit feeds on ambient decay, pulls power from your biology and the world around you. In heavy rad zones, it charges faster. Near FEV clusters, it gets stronger. But most important, it lets you move like you. No clunky joints. No frame lag. No 200-pound core strapped to your back. He paused. Just you, enhanced. Johnny exhaled slowly, eyes locked on the LC-01. You made this for me. Elias shrugged. We made it for survivors. You're just the first one who earned it. Johnny said nothing. He reached up, took the collar of the armor, and in a few practiced motions slid it on. It sealed to him with a hiss and a lock click at the spine. The chest piece tightened. The arm sensors flickered. The HUD flicked to life inside the visor like it had been waiting for his eyes all along. And for the first time since Vault 717, Johnny felt something fit. Not weigh him down. Fit. He turned to Elias, green-white glow pulsing faint under the lenses. LC-01, huh? Guess we'll see what it can do. He turned toward the east. Toward the cracked, smoking skyline of what was once the capital of a dead empire. Let's go wake up some ghosts. They left Lancaster just after dawn. No fanfare. No trumpets. Just the sound of boots on wet asphalt and the low hum of the LC-01 armor as it synced with the ambient radiation wafting off the ruins like morning fog. Johnny led the front, wrapped in the suit that pulsed quietly under the fabric of the old vault suit, its metal quiet, like a knife sheathed in lightning. His revolver sat heavy on his hip. And for once, he didn't feel like he was dragging history behind him. He felt like he was carrying the answer to it. The rest followed at distance. Crag and 3 of his mutant scouts. Milo riding high on a salvaged, stripped-down APC rigged with Brotherhood tech and rebuilt suspension. A pair of ghouls from the Border Patrol, quiet, eyes sharp, seasoned and hard from decades walking radiation like dust. No humans. Not this time. Their destination, the capital wasteland. Their route, winding through the broken belt of Pennsylvania's southern ruins, crawling past irradiated ghost towns and half-collapsed military checkpoints. Through Baltimore's skeleton, into the old world's shattered heart. And eventually, to Vault 101, still sealed, untouched, a time capsule buried in a graveyard. Johnny didn't talk much. He kept to the front, eyes scanning the horizon. Every step felt closer to something. Something buried in his brain, like dust on an old recording. Not quite memory. Not quite hallucination. Just a pull. And the farther south they got, the stronger it became. They made camp in a hollowed freeway tunnel the first night, just north of what was once Columbia, Maryland. Feral territory was light here, but not gone. Scouts took turns on watch. Cragg handled building a wall of debris and old bus frames to keep the ghouls out. Johnny sat just outside camp, staring into the dark with the armor still active, feeding gently on the radiation in the stone. Helena's voice crackled over the long-range relay. "You good out there?" He didn't reply at first. Then finally, "We're moving smooth. No contact yet. But I can feel it out there. Like the wasteland remembers who I am." By day 4, they crossed into the outer rim of the capital wasteland proper. The terrain changed. Became more fractured. More haunted. Collapsed highways twisted like ribs of ancient titans. Whole blocks swallowed by sinkholes or radiation blooms thick enough to warp vision. Mutant camps on the fringes observing, but not attacking. They knew. Somehow, they knew not to approach. At night, Johnny stood on a cliff above a broken military checkpoint and saw it. The skyline. Once marble and ambition. Now bones and rot. The Capitol dome was a black husk in the distance, split down the middle like a cracked skull. Memorials turned to craters. The river choked with wrecks and God knows what else. And tucked between the hills and the ruins. Vault 101. Still sealed. Still watching. Johnny took a breath. "We set up here." He turned to Cragg and the others. "This is your line. Build a forward post. No lights. No movement. No flares unless it's life or death. You don't follow me in. You don't chase me if I don't come back." He looked back toward the Capitol. His voice dropped. "But if I do come back, we'll finally know who the hell lit the match." And with that, Johnny Vanduke, armored in radiation and legacy, walked down the hill into the heart of America's ruins. Alone. And absolutely unafraid. Johnny had seen horrors. Vault 717. The screaming dark. The dying children. The fungus that whispered in memories and rewrote souls. He had lived through nightmares. But nothing, not even the most twisted part of the vault, compared to DC. Not even close. By the time he was deep into the Capitol wasteland, Johnny understood why every scout, traitor, and old veteran who'd whispered about the place had done so with terror in their voice. It wasn't just danger. It was despair turned feral. The bones of the old world had become unavigable. Streets cracked and dropped into sinkholes. Whole intersections swallowed by firestorms or buried beneath irradiated debris. Bridges warped like melted skeletons. Some roads looked passable until a collapsed building or a sunken metro line cut them off after only a mile or two. More than once, Johnny had to double back. More than once, he had to go underground. The DC Metro was hell. No light. No quiet. Just a choking blend of rust, dust, and 1,000 kinds of death waiting in the dark. Super mutants camped in forgotten terminals, roaring and howling at phantoms. Ghouls feral and swarming in some places like rats, silent and twitching in others like broken statues waiting to strike. Giant fire ants the size of motorcycles chittering through broken tunnels, their breath like napalm, their rage endless. The LC-01 held up. Barely. Its radiation absorption kept Johnny alive in zones that would have stripped flesh from bones in seconds. But even it couldn't protect him from exhaustion. Or from the sheer, crushing presence of the city. When he finally surfaced climbing up a half-buried maintenance shaft near the ruins of the National Mall, it had been 3.5 days since he left the forward camp by Vault 101. He thought he'd seen the worst of it. Until he looked across the shattered skyline. Toward what was once the Capitol building. And saw them. Thousands. Super mutants. Not in scattered bands. Not wild or random. Organized. Camps. Patrols. Guard formations. The entire heart of D.C. from the base of the Capitol to the surrounding government blocks was crawling with them. Johnny dropped back into cover, heartbeat steady, but jaw clenched. God damn. They weren't just occupying. They were nesting. He adjusted his armor, knelt in the shadows of a collapsed Federal Archive building, and stared at the impossible mass of monsters moving through the city like ants around a queen. No way through that. Not yet. He pulled up the LC-01's map interface, rerouting his planned path. Tunnels, again. Gotta thread the needle. Maybe the Federal Metro still links up with the Department of Energy's lower tiers. He paused. Then muttered to himself, under breath. You picked a hell of a place to hide your secrets, Enclave. And without another word, Johnny descended once more into the choking dark. Where radiation breathed like fog. And the only light came from the faint, sickly glow in his eyes. Another day. Another crawl through the dead lungs of the old world. Johnny had slept for barely 20 minutes in the past 24 hours. Not because he couldn't, but because there was nowhere left that was safe enough to blink. The Federal Metro lines were older than he expected, untouched by light for nearly 3 decades. Concrete sagged with time and fire. Support beams rusted to rot. Entire sections of the track had been flooded and then frozen into radioactive sludge, now steaming under the artificial heat from above-ground fires. Johnny pushed through it. Wading through decades of stillborn American pride. His LC-01 armor hissed and thrummed, feeding gently off the rot in the air. It was the only thing keeping his muscles from locking up. He passed rooms full of old corpses, government staff who had sealed themselves in bunkers when the bombs fell. Some had hung themselves in silence. Others had left notes. The continuity of government ends here. The Republic died with the dome. One handprint on the wall burned in blood still read, "Nothing is left to serve." He avoided patrols. Not enclave. Not human. But mutants, roaming in oddly structured patterns through the tunnels. He saw one carry a half-broken security bot like a toy. Another moved through a collapsed office, dragging a beam of concrete behind it like a club. At hour 27 since reaching the capital's edge, Johnny finally found it. A sealed maintenance panel tucked behind a fallen stretch of the judiciary wing, a long forgotten ventilation route leading beneath the Capitol building itself. He worked fast. Torch. Pry bar. Cable clamp. The passage was barely wide enough for a person, let alone a person in combat gear. Didn't matter. He crawled. Through dust. Through webbing. Past heat. Past cold. Until he hit steel. An old door. Marked not with Vault-Tec, but with a symbol that hadn't aged a day. Eagle. Shield. Stars. Black enamel. And underneath it, authorized clearance only, Enclave Contingency Safe House 12A. Johnny stared at the symbol. The glow in his armor shifted, reading the rad pulse from the seal. Still faintly active. Still feeding on energy. He cracked his knuckles. There you are, you sons of bitches. He reached into his toolkit. Set the plasma cutter to silent breach. And began to carve. Because after 4 days of fire, monsters, and bone corridors, Johnny Vanduke was finally at the doorstep of the Enclave. And hell was coming in after him. The steel door gave with a groan, ancient hydraulics hissing out one last death rattle as Johnny slipped inside, magnum raised, senses sharpened. Nothing moved. The air was dead, no circulation, no scent, just the cold bite of preservation sealed for decades. The faint whine of something still alive in the corner of the room caught his attention. A server. Old. Pre-war. CIA labeled. The emblem burned onto the metal housing, a stylized eagle overlaying an eye in a triangle. Still humming. Still drawing power from some forgotten generator buried deep beneath the earth. The room was untouched. Dust covered the floors, save for the lone desk in front of the terminal. A chair pulled back just slightly. Johnny moved slowly, armor whispering across broken tile. The terminal screen flickered with sickly green light, faint lines scanning across it. A cursor blinked. User, Director_Tanner_CIA. Still logged in. Still open. Well, damn, Johnny muttered. Guess ghosts leave their doors unlocked. He tapped a key, cautiously. The interface flared open, cascading with folders, stacked with names and dates and coded projects. He scrolled. Project Horizon Initiative. Project Bluejaw. Project Legacy Prime. Enclave Internal Structure, Verified Asset Docs. Federal Continuity Chain, Post First Strike. He stopped. Scanned. Clicked. For the next hour, Johnny poured through the data. And every suspicion he'd buried, every creeping fear was confirmed. The Enclave wasn't born from the ashes. They were built before the fire. A shadow continuity of the pre-war U.S. government, seated across agencies, corporations, military divisions. CIA Department of Energy. Vault Tech. Even West Tech. They'd planned for the end. Hell, they'd welcomed it. They saw the bombs not as a tragedy but as a baptism. And they had been ready. Shelters. Weapons. Personnel. Entire genetic archives. Gone dark before the first mushroom cloud ever rose. And then, nothing. Johnny leaned back in the chair, jaw tight. All this planning. All this tech. And not a damn note about where they went. He scrolled further, hoping for coordinates, mentions of bunkers, anything. And then, he saw it. A single file. File, Vanduke. Status, eyes only, tier black clearance. Johnny froze. Wait. His breath hitched. I didn't have that name before the war. The cursor blinked once. Then again. And everything stopped. The screen blinked once, twice, then shimmered, the dull green CIA interface burning away like dead skin peeling off a glowing wound. Johnny stepped back instinctively. The monitor went black for a heartbeat. Then the screen lit again, white text on a black void, flickering like it was being pulled in from some long-dead satellite. The heading read: Classified, Tier, Black Clearance, Eyes Only, Unauthorized Logging Initiated. Below it, a flood of text. Not technical. Not formal. Paranoid. Desperate. Terrified. For a while, we have always been getting reports about one man showing up at different parts on the East Coast at the same time. But in multiple places. All attempts to capture this man have eluded us. His eyes, they glow. Almost like a predator of the night. Makes sense, considering we only ever see him when it's dark. Johnny's heart began to pound, not fast, not from fear, but with the kind of slow, earth-moving dread a man feels when he sees a reflection before the mirror is even lit. He always seems one step ahead. Always seems to know things he shouldn't. Bullets don't take him down. We've tried every form of chemical we can think of. Nothing can stop this one man. We've heard reports among locals in a very specific part of Pennsylvania known as Lancaster County, that this man calls himself Johnny Vanduke. Johnny stared. His hands slowly lowered to his sides. he whispered, almost involuntarily. But I didn't. His voice faltered. I didn't have that name before. Locals say this thing always shows up when disaster is about to strike. Always appears when something's going wrong. And always stops it. Recently, however, we found a body. His body. We don't know what killed him. But when we opened him up, he's different. The file kept spilling out, line by line, like it had waited 30 years to be read. No need for atmosphere. No need for oxygen. No need for food. No need for water. Enhanced strength. Enhanced speed. Night vision so acute it registers like daylight. Superhuman. Johnny's grip on the desk tightened. The LC-01's gauntlet creaked slightly. He muttered under his breath. They've been watching. And then the technology we found on him. This strange device. We've tried reverse engineering it, but it's impossible. Alien, almost. This tech, it lets you wander timelines. Places. Versions. Whoever these Vanduke are. There are millions of them. The room felt like it tilted sideways. The dust in the air fell upward. Johnny's pulse felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. This is the future of humanity. We need to make our own. We don't know how you get one of these things. We don't know how to make one. But we have more than a few Vault-Tec experiments, including Project Luminary, that we're confident can recreate what happens to these people. If only we knew this person's real name and not the handle. If we had the real name, we could just take the kid before he became this. But that's a far-flung fantasy. We're better off just taking randoms and hoping we get lucky. Johnny stepped back from the screen. Breathing slow. Eyes glowing brighter now. Not from radiation. Not from rage. But from something deeper. Recognition. The truth wasn't that they created him. The truth was they tried. And failed. Because whatever he was, they never figured out how to become it. The terminal flickered once more. A final line of text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Just 2 words. He knows. Johnny didn't move for a long time. He just sat there on the cold, dust-caked concrete floor of that abandoned enclave bunker. His back against the wall, his head bowed, arms resting on his knees. The glow of the terminal still painted the room a dim, flickering green, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He was staring at nothing, and everything, all at once. So you're telling me that? He exhaled sharply, like the breath had been held for years. No. They did get lucky. They accidentally took the right one. His voice echoed off the stone and steel like a confession to a god that never showed up. All the flashes in the dark. All the images in his dreams. All the voices in the vault whispering memories of things he never lived. It wasn't the spores. It wasn't the FEV. It wasn't the hive. It was something else, something already inside him. Something deeper. Older. Buried and waiting. He shook his head slowly, like the pieces were snapping into place in real time. Those visions the hive showed me. They weren't visions. That wasn't them. That wasn't their hallucination. That was me. Other me's. Those powers, the reflexes, the healing, the night sight. His voice dropped, soft and bitter. It was already there. All of it. I didn't survive Project Luminary. I overpowered it. He leaned back against the wall, eyes closing for a second. That's why I stayed human. That's why the other kids didn't make it. They weren't turning into versions of me, they were being ripped apart by a process meant for something they could never survive. They were trying to become me. I was just waking up. His eyes opened again, glowing bright as fresh fire, staring at the ceiling like it might answer him. And if this file is right, if these other versions of me are real, then I'm not crazy. I'm connected. A knowledge pool, from across timelines. That's how I know what I know. That's how I've always known things I shouldn't. Instincts aren't instincts. They're memories. He stood up slowly, the LC-01 armor flexing with the hiss of energy drawn straight from the walls, the decay, from him. His hands clenched into fists. His heart had stopped racing. Because now he understood. That means I can find them. The Enclave thinks they vanished. But if I share information with other versions of myself, then somewhere, one of them's found the core. The heart. The true bunker. He stared at the terminal one more time, then reached up and disabled it with a flick of the switch, cutting off its last whisper. You thought you could recreate me. You couldn't even contain me. He turned toward the exit tunnel. Eyes like white fire. Voice cold, hard, and finally whole. You tried to build the future. But I am the goddamn echo of every future you failed to stop. And I'm coming. The tunnel was silent, broken only by the distant rumble of wind scraping against concrete and the slow thrum of the LC-01's energy draw. Johnny stood in the dark, the light from the terminal behind him now dead. His breathing was steady. His pulse slow. But his mind was on fire. That device. His voice echoed softly, like it didn't want to disturb the ghosts too loudly. The one they found on my body. The one they said couldn't be reverse engineered. The one that lets you move through timelines, realities, versions. He glanced at his own wrist. Bare. Nothing there. No tech. No mechanism. Just his own skin under armored fabric. He turned slowly, scanning the chamber, searching not for movement, but for resonance. Something felt different. He felt it in his bones. It must still be here. It has to be. They never figured it out. So they never destroyed it. They were afraid of it. Afraid of what it meant. And then he heard it. A voice. Not a whisper. Not the hive. Not the vault. Him. A version of him. His own voice, drifting through the silence like a memory bled into the walls. Call sign. Johnny froze. Eyes glowing now, pulling in the fragments of radiation like focus lenses. He wasn't hallucinating. He'd heard himself. Some version of him, somewhere, had left a trail. A signal. That's it. The device doesn't run on coordinates. It runs on identity. A call sign. He stepped deeper into the bunker. Beneath the floor, behind the wall's old shielding hummed faintly now, not electronic but dimensional, reacting to him. The LC-01 shimmered as if it were syncing with something that wasn't quite there. He moved past rusted crates, old lockers, broken biometric gates long since drained of power. And then, behind a half-burned desk, locked in a magnetic crate cracked at the hinge. He found it. A thin, metal band. Old world tech design but curved, elegant, alien. It didn't glow. It pulsed. It breathed. He picked it up. And the moment his fingers touched the surface, it snapped into place around his wrist with a sound like wind warping time. He gasped but didn't drop it. Because the second it latched on, a screen opened projected in the air, blue-white lines of cascading data flowing in alien code. Then, one word in perfect clarity. Enter call sign. Johnny stared at it. He didn't know how. He didn't know why. But the answer was already there. In his blood. In the spores. In the radiation. In the echoes of other selves whispering through his skull like ancient drums. He opened his mouth. And without hesitation, he spoke. Vanduke. The world around him shifted. Not like a door opening. More like the page turned, and he was still standing there. But now everything else was different. The walls shimmered. The device on his wrist activated fully, symbols and maps flickering across space-time. And now, he wasn't just a man walking through the wasteland anymore. He had coordinates. Timelines. Threads of fate. And the thing he'd been chasing his whole life? He wasn't chasing it anymore. He was riding it. The call sign. It's not just a name. It's a key. He looked out at the tunnel. At the ruins. At the billions of ruined possibilities stretching across time like bones in the sand. Let's open some doors. Activate, call sign / Vanduke. Access granted. System link established. Next sequence initializing. The device around his wrist pulsed once, sharply like a second heartbeat clicking into sync with a frequency not of this world. Johnny didn't flinch. Didn't question. He just raised his arm slightly, letting the display bloom outward in a thin arc of light and particles, crackling in the air like static made visible. The projection adjusted to his body, locking onto biometric signature, Vanduke. A list of strings cascaded through the interface. Coordinates. Dates. Snapshots. Places he'd never been, but somehow still recognized. Then, one line stabilized. Forward camp, Vault 101 region, code lock, primed. He didn't need to input anything. The device already knew. He exhaled slowly, more out of instinct than necessity. All right, let's start small. Take me home. He tapped the string. There was no flash of light. No thunderclap. No dramatic swirl of energy. It was like blinking. One breath in one reality, and exhaling in another. The air changed. The scent of cracked pavement and scorched earth was replaced by the sulfur and rust of a burned-out ranger station tucked into the hills just north of Vault 101. The forward camp. He stood in the same exact posture, body unmoved, expression unreadable, but the entire world around him had changed. Wind brushed through the broken scaffolding. A distant mutant roared. Crag was mid-sentence by the supply cart, turning to yell at a ghoul over a bad weld job. Until his head snapped toward Johnny like a war drum had struck. Eyes wide. Boss. What the hell, how did you? Johnny stepped forward once, the armor gleaming faintly with reabsorbed flux energy from the jump. The device around his wrist hissed, its light fading down into standby. He gave a nod. Had to take the long way in. Milo dropped his rifle where he stood. You were gone less than a minute, Johnny. Johnny looked down at his hands, flexed them once, and then toward the horizon beyond the ridge. Not for me. It's just getting started. And then, without a word, he sat down beside the old fire pit, armor steaming off the shift, eyes glowing faint in the half-light. Home for now. But the next world was already whispering his name.